The rain had just started to fall when Emma pulled into the long driveway of her friend's house. She'd been dreading this weekend trip, but she didn't know why. Maybe it was because she hadn't seen her old friend Lily in almost 5 years. Or maybe it was because Lily's family had always been complicated. The last time she visited, she'd left feeling like she'd been watched, studied. Not in a bad way, just like someone had seen through her more than she wanted. That someone was Lily's uncle, Daniel. He wasn't creepy or strange. Quite the opposite. He was calm, observant, and had this quiet kind of warmth that made people open up. Emma had been 23 back then, nervous and lost, unsure what to do with her life. Daniel had said one thing to her that stuck for years. You keep waiting for the right moment, but sometimes the moment is waiting for you. She hadn't known what to say. But she remembered that look in his eyes, kind, knowing, and a little sad. Now 5 years later, she was back. The house looked the same, pale blue shutters, an old maple tree leaning toward the porch, and that faint smell of coffee and rain drifting through the air. Lily greeted her with a hug, full of laughter and warmth, just like old times. Inside, everything felt familiar. The creaky floor, the cozy couch, the photographs of family trips. But when Emma glanced toward the kitchen, she saw him. Daniel. He was sitting by the window, reading a book, glasses sliding down his nose. His hair had more gray in it now, and there was something different about his face. A softness that came from time, not weakness. When he looked up and saw her, his eyes brightened. "Emma, it's been a long time." His voice was just as steady as she remembered. They talked briefly, polite, casual words. She told him about her new job at a marketing firm, how she'd moved to Seattle, and how she hadn't quite figured out what she was doing there. He listened, really listened, like he always had. Later that evening, as the others laughed around the dinner table, Emma felt herself watching Daniel. Not because she was drawn to him in that way, but because he had this presence, like everything he did had meaning. When he spoke, even simple words carried weight. After dinner, Lily went to bed early, and the house grew quiet. Emma stepped outside onto the porch to breathe in the cool night air. The rain had stopped, but the scent lingered fresh and deep. Daniel joined her a few minutes later, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He handed one to her without a word. For a while, they just stood there, listening to the sound of crickets and the distant rustle of trees. Then he said softly, "You look tired, Emma. Not the kind of tired that sleep can fix." She let out a small laugh. "That obvious?" he smiled. "You've always carried more than you needed to. Some people do that. They mistake heaviness for purpose." His words hit her harder than she expected. She stared into the darkness, thinking about the long nights at her apartment, the empty hours spent chasing promotions and deadlines. "I thought that's what I was supposed to do," she said quietly. "Work hard. Keep going. Build something." Daniel took a sip of his coffee, then looked at her. "And what did it build?" That question sat heavy between them. Emma didn't answer right away. She didn't know how. If you're enjoying this story so far, please like the video and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. Finally, she said, "It built, I don't know, maybe walls." Daniel nodded slowly. "The world tells us to chase progress, but sometimes progress just means running faster in the same circle." She looked at him. "So what should I do? Stop trying?" "No," he said softly. "Just start noticing what actually feels like living." His tone was simple, but his eyes carried something deeper, something that made her heart ache in a way she didn't expect. That night, Emma lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling. She could still hear Daniel's voice echoing in her mind. She'd spent years building walls around herself, working hard, avoiding failure, avoiding disappointment. But maybe she'd also avoided feeling. The next morning, she found Daniel in the garden, trimming plants in silence. She stood there for a moment, just watching him. He seemed at peace in a way she couldn't understand. She wanted to ask him more, how he found that calm, what he meant by noticing life. But before she could, Lily came outside, cheerful and chatty. The moment passed, but something inside Emma had shifted. She didn't know what yet. Only that she couldn't stop thinking about that question. What did it build? The morning light filtered through the kitchen window, spilling across the counter where Daniel was making coffee. The smell alone made the house feel alive again. Emma sat at the table, half awake, wrapped in a soft blanket Lily had left out for her. She wasn't sure why, but she felt calm, more than she had in weeks. Lily came in a few minutes later, bright as always. "Big day ahead. Uncle Daniel's taking us into town. There's a small art fair by the lake." Emma smiled faintly. "Sounds nice." She didn't realize how much she needed nice until that moment. Just something simple, something quiet. Later they drove into town, Lily in the passenger seat, Daniel behind the wheel, and Emma watching the road unfold through the window. The trees glowed golden under the fall sun, and the air smelled faintly of cinnamon and wood smoke. At the art fair, Daniel walked a little slower than the others, taking time to stop and look at every little thing. The carved wooden birds, the hand-painted mugs, the photographs of old barns. He didn't rush. Emma noticed it. The way he took in the world, like he was seeing it, not passing through it. When Lily ran off to look at jewelry, Daniel and Emma ended up by a booth that sold vintage books. He ran a hand along a row of weathered spines and said, almost to himself, "You can tell how much someone's lived by how gently they turn a page." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" He smiled softly. "People who rush through life don't treat things gently. They grab, they force, they move on. But people who've learned to slow down, they notice what they're touching." Emma looked at him quietly. "You really think slowing down is that important?" "I think it's everything," he said. "When you slow down, you start hearing the truth that's been talking to you the whole time." They kept walking through the fair, not saying much, but something about his words lingered. Emma thought about her own life, the endless emails, the late nights, the rush to prove herself. When they got back home that afternoon, Lily went to nap, and Daniel sat out back under the old maple tree. Emma joined him, still carrying the quiet from earlier. He handed her a small book, an old collection of poems. "You looked like someone who needed this," he said. She flipped through the pages. The poems were simple but deep. They talked about loss, time, and the beauty of ordinary moments. "Did you write any of these?" she asked, smiling. He chuckled. "No, but I used to think about it. Writing was how I made sense of things when life got too loud." Emma hesitated, then asked, "Was life loud for you?" Daniel looked up at the branches above. "Once, I was chasing things that didn't matter. Money, approval, busy days that made me feel useful." She listened carefully. His tone wasn't bitter, just honest. What changed? He looked at her then, eyes calm but full. "Losing someone I loved. It made me realize how much I'd missed while trying to have more." Her chest tightened. She didn't ask who. She could feel the weight behind his words. For a while, neither spoke. The wind rustled the leaves, and a few floated down onto Daniel's lap. He brushed them away gently, smiling faintly. "You ever notice," he said, "how nature never forces anything? The trees don't try to grow faster. The wind doesn't rush where it's not needed. Maybe we're the only ones who forgot how to move with life." Emma nodded slowly. "I think I've been running from stillness for years." Daniel turned to her, his voice softer now. "Stillness isn't empty, Emma, it's full. You just have to let yourself stay long enough to see it." The words sank deep. That night, Emma sat alone by the window in her guest room. The sky was dark, filled with stars, and she thought about everything Daniel had said. For the first time in a long while, she didn't scroll through her phone or check her messages. She just sat there, still, quiet, and in that stillness, she felt something. Small, unfamiliar, but real. Peace. She hadn't realized how rare that had become in her life. When Lily knocked on her door later to say goodnight, Emma just smiled and said, "It's been a good day." Lily grinned. "Uncle Daniel has that effect on people." Emma laughed softly. Yeah, I'm starting to see that. As she lay in bed, she thought about his words again, about slowing down, about noticing what matters. But there was one thing she couldn't shake, that quiet sadness behind his eyes when he'd mentioned loss. She wondered who he had lost and why. Somehow, it felt connected to the peace he carried now. The next morning was foggy. Mist hung low across the fields behind the house, and everything felt still, like the world was holding its breath. Emma woke early and wandered into the kitchen. Daniel was already there, pouring coffee, a quiet hum in his throat. Couldn't sleep? He asked, glancing at her with that gentle smile. Not really, she said. I kept thinking about what you said yesterday. He poured her a mug. About slowing down? She nodded. And about loss. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he said softly, You really listen, don't you? She shrugged, a little embarrassed. I try to. He looked down at his cup, eyes far away. My wife's name was Clare. We were married for 23 years. Emma's breath caught. He continued quietly. She passed away 8 years ago, cancer. It started small and ended fast. His tone wasn't heavy, but it carried years of silence behind it. I'm sorry, Emma said softly. He nodded, as if he'd heard it 100 times. I used to live loud, always planning, fixing, controlling. But when she got sick, life slowed whether I wanted it to or not. The quiet that came after, that's what taught me everything. Emma's eyes softened. That's why you live the way you do now? He smiled faintly. Partly, losing her made me see how precious the unnoticed moments were. The morning light, a shared laugh, the space between words. I didn't want to waste that anymore. They stood there in silence for a while, sipping coffee, listening to the soft tick of the old kitchen clock. Later, they took a walk along the back trail that ran behind the house. The air was crisp, the ground covered in fallen leaves that crunched underfoot. Daniel pointed to a small wooden bench under a birch tree. She used to sit there and read. Said the light was just right at this hour. Emma felt her chest tighten. You kept it here all this time? He nodded. It reminds me to sit still sometimes. To just be. She sat down beside him. The quiet stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt peaceful, like the kind of silence that says everything words can't. After a long pause, Emma said, I think I'm afraid of quiet. It makes me feel like I've failed somehow. Daniel turned to her. Failed what? Life, she admitted. Everyone's out there doing things, achieving things. When I stop, I feel behind. He smiled, not unkindly. That's because you're measuring your life by noise instead of meaning. She looked at him. So how do I stop doing that? He leaned back on the bench, eyes on the trees. By asking yourself one question, would I still do this if no one saw it? Emma blinked, the words sinking in. He continued, If the answer's yes, it's probably something real. If it's no, it's probably just noise. She didn't respond right away. Her mind drifted to all the things she'd done for show. The job she didn't love, the promotions she'd chased just to prove she could, the endless striving for something that never felt enough. Maybe I've built my whole life on noise, she whispered. Daniel smiled gently. Then you've got the best starting point of all. You know what not to build on next time. His calmness amazed her. He spoke like a man who'd already wrestled with everything she was just beginning to understand. When they got back to the house, Lily was waiting on the porch, waving her phone. Emma, we're all going out for dinner tonight. You're coming, right? Emma hesitated, then smiled. Yeah, I'll come. As Lily went inside to get ready, Daniel stayed on the porch. It's good to join people, he said quietly. But don't forget, solitude isn't loneliness. Sometimes it's the only place we can hear what we really feel. That night at dinner, Emma watched the laughter around her, the music, the chatter. It was nice, but she felt herself drifting into thought. Daniel's words echoed in her mind. Would I still do this if no one saw it? She realized how many of her choices had been shaped by what others might think. Her career, her relationships, even the way she smiled when she didn't mean it. After dinner, as they walked back to the car, Daniel said, "You were quiet tonight." She smiled softly. "Just thinking," he nodded. "Thinking is good, but don't get stuck there. Feeling comes next." She met his eyes. "I'm not sure I know how to feel anymore." He looked at her for a long moment, his expression kind but serious. "Then maybe that's what you came back here to remember." Emma didn't know what he meant exactly, but his words left a weight in her chest, the kind that didn't hurt, but stayed. Later that night, she couldn't sleep. She went out to the porch where the moonlight glowed across the yard. The old bench under the birch tree was just visible in the distance. She stood there a long time, thinking about everything he'd said, about loss, meaning stillness, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like running from it. The next morning, Emma woke to the sound of soft music coming from downstairs. It was an old tune, one her mother used to play on rainy days. She followed the sound and found Daniel in the living room, dusting off a wooden shelf. He turned when he saw her and smiled. "Morning, early bird," she grinned. "You always up this early?" "Old habits," he said. "Mornings remind me there's always another chance to start softer." Emma liked that. Start softer. It sounded like something she hadn't done in a long time. After breakfast, Lily left to meet friends in town, leaving the two of them alone again. Emma helped Daniel clean out a few old boxes from the attic. Dust floated through the light, and the air smelled faintly of cedar. They sorted through books, framed photos, and stacks of old letters tied with string. Some were yellowed with time. Daniel chuckled as he looked through a pile. Claire used to write letters to everyone, even people she saw every day. She said paper made feelings stay longer. Emma smiled. "That's beautiful." He handed her one carefully. "Here, read this one." "It's not too personal." Emma unfolded the paper. The handwriting was neat and looping. "Daniel, remember to pause. The world won't fall apart if you stop for breath. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is rest." Emma swallowed hard. "She really understood you," Daniel nodded. "Better than I understood myself." They worked quietly for a while. Then, in one of the drawers of an old desk, Emma found an unopened envelope with her name written on it. Emma Bennett. She froze. "Wait, this can't be for me." Daniel looked up, surprised. "What?" She showed him the letter. He took it carefully, adjusting his glasses. After a pause, he said softly, "That's Claire's handwriting." Emma frowned. "But how? I didn't even know her." He looked at the envelope again, thoughtful. "Maybe you should open it." Her hands trembled as she did. The letter inside was short, written years ago. "Emma, I met you once, briefly when you visited Lily. You reminded me of myself at your age. I saw the same restlessness, the same search for meaning. If life ever feels too heavy, know this: gentle things last. The world doesn't need your perfection. It needs your presence." Emma's throat tightened. "She remembered me?" Daniel nodded slowly. "She did. She mentioned you once, said you had kind eyes and carried a quiet storm." Tears welled in Emma's eyes. "I don't even know what to say." "Then don't," Daniel said softly. "Just feel it." She sat down on the old rug, letter in hand, her heart full and breaking at the same time. The woman she barely knew had written something that reached into the exact place she'd been struggling with for years. Daniel sat beside her quietly. "She would have liked to see you find peace." Emma looked at him, her voice shaky. "Maybe she just helped me start." They spent the rest of the afternoon going through old things, but the letter stayed with her. Every word echoed in her mind. Gentle things last. That evening, the sun dipped low behind the trees, painting the room in gold. Emma found herself sitting by the window, holding the letter again. She thought about her own life, how hard she'd been trying to be everything for everyone. To be perfect. To be seen, but Claire's words whispered differently. Maybe it wasn't about being seen. Maybe it was about being here. Later, she stepped outside. The air was cool, and the birch tree swayed softly in the breeze. She sat on the old bench, Claire's bench, and felt something she hadn't in years. Stillness. The sky dimmed, and the first stars began to show. She looked toward the house and saw Daniel watching from the porch, his face calm, almost proud. He didn't say anything. He just nodded, like he knew she'd finally understood something words could never teach. Emma smiled faintly and turned her eyes back to the sky. For the first time, she wasn't thinking about what came next. She was simply there, present, gentle things, last. But just as the peace settled in, she noticed Daniel turn away, his shoulders heavy. His step slower than before. Something about it made her heart catch, as if there was something he hadn't told her yet. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the windows, touching everything with quiet warmth. The rain from the night before had washed the air clean. Emma walked downstairs, still thinking about the letter she'd found. She found Daniel sitting on the porch, holding a small cup of tea instead of coffee this time. He looked peaceful, but there was something different about him, a kind of weariness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Morning," she said softly. He smiled. "Morning, Emma." She sat down beside him, pulling her cardigan tighter against the cool air. "You were up early again." He nodded. "Couldn't sleep much. Some days the body remembers what the heart's still letting go." His words carried a tone she couldn't quite read. Gentle, but final. Emma looked out at the garden, where the leaves were beginning to turn. "I read the letter again before coming down," she said. "Claire really saw things most people miss." Daniel's gaze softened. "She did. And she'd be glad you found it." Emma hesitated, then asked, "Why do you think she wrote it to me?" "We barely met," he turned to her. "Maybe because she sensed you needed a reminder someday. She used to say that kindness travels farther than we'll ever know." They sat in silence for a long time. The air carried the faint scent of pine and wet soil. Finally, Daniel spoke again, his voice calm. "You know, Emma, sometimes when people come into our lives, it's not for long. It's just long enough to give us something we were missing." She turned toward him. "You think that's what this weekend was?" He smiled faintly. "I think it's what it was for both of us." Something in his tone made her chest tighten. "Daniel," she said carefully, "are you okay?" He chuckled softly. "Old age catches up faster than we plan for. But don't worry, I'm fine." She wanted to believe him, but there was something in the way he said fine that made her uneasy. That afternoon, Lily came home with groceries, chattering about a new cafe in town. Emma helped her in the kitchen, but her mind kept drifting to Daniel. Later, when she went to bring him some tea, she found him in the garden, sitting under the birch tree, the same spot where Clare used to read. His head was leaned back, eyes closed, face calm. For a moment, she thought he was asleep. Then she realized he wasn't. Her breath caught. She knelt beside him, her hands trembling, calling his name softly. "Daniel. Daniel." But he didn't move. His expression was peaceful, like someone who had finally found rest. Lily came running when she heard Emma's voice, and what followed was a blur. The calls, the tears, the quiet disbelief. That night, when the house grew still again, Emma sat on the porch, the letter from Clare folded in her lap. She could still hear Daniel's voice in her mind. "The world won't fall apart if you stop for breath." She cried quietly, not from fear or loss, but from a strange mix of sadness and gratitude. He had given her something she hadn't even known she needed, a way back to herself. Days later, after the small family gathering and the gentle farewells, Emma stayed behind one more night. She sat beneath the birch tree with a notebook in her hands. For the first time, she began to write. Not for work, not for approval, just to feel. She wrote about the quiet mornings, the coffee, the laughter, the lessons. About Daniel's calm presence. About the letter that reminded her that gentle things truly last. As she finished, a light breeze swept across the garden, rustling the leaves above her. She looked up, smiling through her tears. "I get it now," she whispered. "You were never trying to teach me how to change my life. You were teaching me how to live it." The air grew still again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was full of warmth, memory, and peace. The kind of stillness that doesn't ask for anything. It simply is. Emma stayed there until the first stars appeared, the quiet wrapping around her like a promise. She knew she'd return to her city soon. But she also knew something had shifted forever. She'd stopped chasing noise. She'd noticed the gentle things. And she'd remember the man who reminded her how to breathe again, because some people leave without ever truly being gone. And in that stillness, Emma finally understood. She'd found what she'd been searching for all along.